welcome to the interview for Montessori Everywhere, Barb Langford. Thank you for joining us and sharing your story. So I just wanted to start by opening the interview with the question of, tell us about your Montessori journey from the start up until now.
Okay, so approximately 35 years ago, I came across Montessori as a short paragraph in a book when I was pregnant with my first child, and it just said enough that it made me think about what I wanted to be as a parent. And so I started to look into Montessori and realised that it sat very well with my own personal philosophy on life, and actually probably how I was parented without the name Montessori behind it. So I started to study it really just as a parent, thinking that it would help me to understand my own children. Eventually I found a little homeschool for my son to go to. It was Montessori, loved it. When my daughter was born, that little space wasn't available anymore. And so someone said, well, why don't you start your own? And, stardust in the eyes and, oh, that sounds like a good idea, without obviously realising what was ahead. So that's exactly what I did. I started my first little school called Jescott. I have two children, Jessica and Scott. And so Jescott Montessori started in 1989. And so Jessica was one of the first students there. My journey then really was from very small beginnings, learning all of the complications that come into looking after other people's children, but realising and recognising that I really loved the challenge of that, and I loved what was happening for those children. So really, I didn't go looking for another opportunity, but opportunities came my way from that point onwards. And I think I'm just very good at seeing an opportunity and getting challenged by that. That's my forte. That's my value. That I get very excited about it because I love the opportunity to make Montessori available to so many children, and I so believe it. And I've so seen the results of working with children in a Montessori environment that it just inspires me to keep going. So at 65 years of age, I'm still going. I'm still looking forward to new projects, and I really don't, I'm really not tired of it because it's so exciting. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how I've rolled for over 30 years now.
So you started with Jescott. How many centres have you got now?
Okay, so I've currently got 6 active centres at the moment. Over the years, I've had probably 9, I think, centres. So a couple of our centres were located on the grounds of big colleges, independent colleges. So, for instance, one of the big schools here is Walford College for girls. So we did 10 years in that school running their early learning centre as a Montessori centre. And then after 10 years, basically our lease was up, so we had to relocate. So I've actually started from nothing 9 times, but currently we have 6 of those centres still running, and another one that we're starting next year, which is a new project with doing an intergenerational exchange, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. So did you want to tell us a bit more about that new project?
Sure. So from my point of view, basically our story is that we're a very close family, and I watched my parents in their aging years. Obviously, I watched my mum go through dementia, which was pretty sad, but my dad was very vibrant right up to his last days. We became very close in caring for them and in realising what the most important part of people in aging is to feel useful, is to feel connected, is to feel that they're still contributing. And the loneliness factor can be just devastating. So Jess and I, quite some time ago, my daughter and I started to look into Montessori in aged care. And whilst typically that tends to be applied to people who are partway through dementia or are on that journey, we wanted to try and look at, well, how can we use it in a preventive way, if you like, to come back a little bit more earlier than people in care, in nursing care. So we looked very carefully at how we could do that, and we formed a relationship with a group in Adelaide called ECH, who are basically is a very large independent not-for-profit group who look after people in their retirement years, and their philosophy is keeping people well at home. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll turn that off. Sorry. So we felt a synergy with them and their philosophy about looking after people in their aged years, and we therefore started to plan several years ago how we could form a community, how we could form a village where the intergenerational exchange was happening every day, not just an arbitrary visit to old people and then we read stories and then we all go home. And so they have a project that they've just nearly completed, which is a really beautiful space of vertical village, basically, of apartments, beautiful apartments, and the whole village is interconnected with, with food and growing areas and all those things, and we are part of that. They've built a beautiful new early learning centre there. So our vision is that we will conduct our Montessori practical life, I guess, with elders, with people who can help to be the masters teaching their apprentices. And we see that connection happening every day, so that the children will be out and about in the village. There are spaces we can do things together. There are lots of retired people who've already approached me who are retired teachers or artists or musicians, all of those things. These are the people that want to come in and work with the children. So we're very excited to think that this is pretty much, I think, one of the first centres that will be truly intergenerational, and we'll be kind of watching what that does for people as they get into that space of getting much older. So it's very exciting. We're kind of doing it because we've seen what happens and how important it is, and we know the capabilities of children to connect and to inspire people and to give language back to people and meaning, and it's just beautiful. So yeah, we're very excited. So that's my next. So
Yeah.
at 65, I'm just signing a new lease for 15 years. So I'm hoping that one day I'll be sort of rolled out in a wheelchair. But I'm very happy to think of that again. It's just inspired a different direction for me. It's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you Montessori starting in the early years, which typically globally that's what it's seen as. What do you love about Montessori, not just in those early years, but across life as an aid to life?
Well, I think that's exactly what it is. It is an aid to life. I've obviously only really experienced the children who are in those early years who then progress through, but I have kept connection with many of them. We have students that come back and visit, or students who come and do their teaching pracs with us and so forth. So we've watched a lot of life turn over, and in 35 years, hundreds and hundreds of children have been through our care. So I see the value not only to the child, but also to their families who have adopted the understanding of how to parent, of what to be, how to be with their children. And so I see that sort of the web of Montessori extending everywhere, and it's really exciting for me. I'm absolutely convinced that my own children's ability to self-assess and to be strong in their own confidence and to be who they are, I'm absolutely certain it's because they were lucky enough that I kind of understood the Montessori approach early in my parenting years, and that gave them the confidence to take on the world. And that's all I ever wanted. I whatever they did academically or how, it doesn't matter. What I wanted were whole human beings who could make those decisions and those life decisions. And that certainly my children have, and I see that so often with other children. So I love Montessori way outside its pink tower. It is to me, it is a way of living. And as I said before, my parents, I'm sure, were very Montessori in their approach to parenting, but just didn't have a label. But that's how we were brought up, and I really believe that the goodness of that, the giving to community, the understanding of the bigger picture of caring for each other, those are the nurturing things that you carry with you throughout your whole life, and they're the things that make you successful in life. And that's why I love Montessori.
And so how have you seen Montessori and aged care grow from, over the last decade or however long you've known about it in that sector?
Yeah.
What excites you the most about that development globally?
In aged care?
Yep.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot happening, and in that space, and I believe that there is recently has been in Australia a program on one of our television programs about a similar project, which has really inspired a lot of people who've watched it. And I keep hearing that all the time. And I guess what I say to them is that was beautiful. It was a beautiful experiment to do. But what we're going to do is slightly different, because it won't be with people who are in nursing care, but it also won't be just an arbitrary thing. I see that it has grown, and I'm hearing it all the time. There are lots and lots of places now who are working with aged care providers to take the children there, or the children or the residents come into the childcare space and work with them. We have that in all of our centres at the moment, where we're doing things like garden projects, where the residents who are healthy and garden can come in and work with our children. And so I think it's wonderful, and I think it's inspired a different way of care. I think it's inspired people to look at older people the same way as what we believe we should be looking at younger children. We should be treating them with respect. We should see them as having value, no matter what that value is, and we should be assisting them to be the best that they can. And those principles can be and should be applied in aged care, no matter where that is. But excuse me, part of the reason that a lot of care at the moment is not as good as we'd like is simply staffing, and that's what we know even in early childhood. It's the quality of the people who are working with those people that makes a difference.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges you've seen in your Montessori journey, or in Montessori since it began, since 35 years ago? What have you seen? What are the challenges that we've faced?
Okay, many challenges. I think initially the challenge was people didn't really know what Montessori was, and so we were seen as a bit of a cult, I think. But we were the alternative group, and so that was very difficult because people didn't know what to expect. And there weren't many Montessori centres around in South Australia at that stage. So I think just having some recognition of the fact that we weren't abnormal and we didn't do abnormal things with children was a very big challenge initially. For us, when we were asked to cohabitate on a very large college grounds in a very prestigious college, that was for us a really fabulous bonus, because it gave recognition, it gave a tick of approval from a very from a very prestigious school that Montessori was worth being their early learning approach. And so from there that it built. On my reflection, that was one of the very first times that I think Montessori became more broadly known within the community of education in general. Certainly that inspired other schools to approach us to help in their centres as well. But I think along the way, we've always had a challenge of, I guess, not just recognition, but more importantly, I think the difficulty started to come in when Montessori had to be applied in longer daycare. And I think this is still a challenge that we're looking at the moment, because in days gone by, Montessori, when I first started, different associations were all fractured around Australia. There wasn't a united body. Subsequently, Montessori Australia Foundation tried to bring that together, and we started to succeed as a group. But there's very much always been within that, I think, a focus on the primary schooling, and early childhood was really not a major focus. And I think actually that's where it needs to start. And early childhood became such that if you were going to operate in South Australia and you wanted your families to be able to access Commonwealth funding like everyone else, you had to become a longer day centre. You couldn't just do sessions and, you know, term times. So we were forced by necessity to become longer daycare centres. And at that point, I think people didn't quite know what to do with Montessori, because when you have children there, some of them, not in my centres, but in some centres, from 6 in the morning until 6 at night, you know, we're not just talking about 3-hour work cycles here. We're talking a much greater sense of needing to care for the routines and the daily needs of those children who are in our care for extremely long hours. And so I think adapting Montessori and getting some recognition from the Montessori groups around Australia that early childhood has to be seen not just as a 3-hour work cycle and then we all go home. You know, it had to be seen in a different way. And I think adapting that has been a big challenge for all operators who want to be authentic in their Montessori approach, but who we have to recognise that there is something more. We have to look at the child really deeply and look at their care needs and their attachment needs and their need for consistency of care and all those things. So I think that became the next biggest challenge in Australia, is to recognise that that was the area that's actually growing. Montessori in the early years is growing. And so that was a major challenge for us, and a major challenge in getting people to see that we weren't just filtering it down. We were still authentic Montessori. And I think that started the roll on then of, you know, okay, are you trained in this or are you trained in that? And, you know, and the realities are that for me, that I think that we are, to a great degree, I think educators either have an ability to be Montessori or they don't. And that's a good starting point. And from there, you know, we can train people, we can give them insight into Montessori at a deeper level, but we've got to have that basis first with those children where they're truly loved and truly respected for what they are. So I think, you know, there's still a battle going on in Australia, I think, between people who feel that, you know, you're not fully authentic unless you have every staff member trained, all of the above. And I think that's a battle that's still going to go for a little while. But I desperately hope that we all arrive at a place where we can say that Montessori is from your heart. And, you know, so a little bit of training is great, but we are still doing the best we can with children based on that heart. And I'd hate to lose that from being seen as still really good practice in Montessori. So yeah, there's been a lot of challenges. You know, as a whole, I think I've seen it travel from being nothing, where people just didn't understand it. I've now seen a lot of people looking for Montessori, but a lot of them perhaps not, a lot of parents don't quite know what it is yet, but they do at least see that it's good practice. And that's fabulous. You know, I think Montessori has a great reputation of providing good practice. And we now just have to filter out the centres that call themselves Montessori that don't do good practice. They're the ones that we don't want to invite in. But if they're trying, and if they genuinely have that heart, then absolutely we should be welcoming everybody into that realm.
Yeah. And so talking about recognition, what was it like for your first centre to get rated excellent by CEQA?
Yeah, it was lovely. There were a couple of things. We spent a lot of time wondering whether we should even be applying for an excellent rating, because we were a small centre, a very much a family orientated centre, a very small community. And we knew we were already doing a great job. And I guess if you look at what Montessori represents, you know, we're not looking for recognition. We're not looking for rewards. And so we agreed that whatever an outcome was in our assessments, that it actually doesn't change who we are, and it didn't change who we are. Our practice, we didn't do something new or different just to attain a particular level. We just were who we were. And so based on that, what we really felt was that we owed it to Montessori actually to apply to get the excellent rating, because we wanted recognition for Montessori that we could be the very best using Montessori, that we weren't different, we weren't alternative, that the EYLF, the Early Years Learning Framework, could have been written by Maria Montessori. That's just what we do. We didn't have to change our practice when the EYLF came out. We already do these things. And so for us, it was about standing up proudly and saying, it doesn't matter what pedagogy you use, it's about what's happening to those children. And in our case, Montessori is how we get there, using the tools and the pedagogy that we understand. That's how we got there to be excellent. And so that was our reasoning behind it. So from there, I would have to say, I don't think I've ever had a parent who's rung and said, oh, because you have the excellent rating, we would like to come to your centre. I don't think it's had any influence on enrolments, and I'm glad about that. That's not what, I don't believe that's necessarily what parents look for. I think they look for what they come in looking for a feel for what their child can gain in being safe and loved and looked after. And I think, from that point of view, it was lovely to have the excellent rating. Luckily we got that twice, but I don't know that we'll apply for it again, Rebecca, because it's done its job. It doesn't mean I don't want to wear a crown. We know that our centres are at a certain level. We do self-assess. We know where things have to happen to be different or better if we can on reflection, but it doesn't change us. And I just don't think it's something that we'll consider doing again. I think we're just happy that it happened for Montessori and for us, but it hasn't changed us.
I do think that statistically, the amount of excellent rated centres that were Montessori, though, did help with recognition for Montessori as excellent practice.
Yes.
So thank you for that work. So what are some stories that you have of working with children, or changes that you've seen a child coming into a Montessori environment or a family that you might be willing to share, that have been things that have changed your life or gone, this is why we do what we do?
Okay. I think the thing that's so impactful for me always is that we can look at children without labels. I have seen so many times where a child has come into our centre and been a high energy child maybe, or, where their behaviours are slightly different. And educators are very quick to put labels on children and to see a problem. And in our centres, we very much try to get the staff to take away labels. Just look at this child and why do you think this is happening? What is it? And this is the child that needs you the most. We're not going to have a delivery of normalised children come into our centres. This is our job. There are children at all different levels of abilities and emotional stability, and it's actually our job to help that child, to work with that child and to lead them on a path that can make them feel safe and loved. And I have seen the changes in some children that it's been so dramatic, where they have been, they've come into us without any sense of stability about themselves. So they're off all over the place, and their behaviours are really sort of unacceptable, if you like. And how by putting some loving boundaries in and just accepting that child and making them feel okay, to express their problems or to be who they are, but to let's help you together, let's get this together. I have seen that change, and it's almost, to me, that's what fills my heart, because those children, no child starts out being a bad child. and sometimes for lots of reasons that we might never know about in a family, children can be affected dramatically. And so when they come to us, we don't know all that backstory, and we have to take a fresh look, and we have to nurture that child, because we know that inside that child there's a great child who's wanting to be great. And that to me has been one of the most beautiful things that I've seen in Montessori, is our ability to support children and families and accept them for who they are and help them going forward. And I've seen the blossoming of children. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Absolutely. And what does the future look like for Montessori in your opinion?
Mm. I hope that it grows. I hope that the movement grows. I can see that it is already on its way. And I think people, families in particular, are sort of feeling very nervous about the future. And I think children also have been overwhelmed with things that are going wrong in this world. And I feel like that parents are now going to be really looking for safe spaces for their child. And I mean safe emotionally, as well as physically. So I see that our families are becoming much more informed. And whilst a lot of them might still not know what Montessori really is, again, it's that feel, it's that sense of comfort walking into a Montessori centre where you know that your child is going to be important here. So I hope it grows. I think it will. I know, we all have different backgrounds, different training. I think the aim that I can see now on a national level is that, again, we really push to bring this together, and to bring people together to say, let's forget all the extraneous bits. Let's just look at what our purpose is. And our purpose is really to help the children of this world to grow up to be great human beings and to want to participate in community and to make the world a better place. So, excuse me. So if we can help that, then I think Montessori's got a place forever. And I think more and more people are questioning our traditional schooling methods, and wondering what's happening with there. And already we see a great swing back already to suddenly, it's not about being academically gifted at year 12. There's real life that you have to learn. And suddenly all the things that were given away before in the trade schools are now being brought back, because children need to learn to live in a real world. And that's what we're doing, isn't it? Right from the beginning, we're skilling these children to actually to know how to be independent and how to grow into decent human beings. So I'm very hopeful. I think Montessori is something that already has a good reputation around the world as being a good quality system. And I think if we stop being fractional between training bodies or whatever, and we just recognise our common goal, I think it should be continuous, and I think it'll grow, and I think it'll be, I think people will be proud to have had a Montessori upbringing.
Yeah. And so how do you think we get there? So we're going to grow. What are some suggestions or ideas you have for that movement to grow?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's starting to, I think a lot of it's been happening for a while. I think the initial intention of the national body was to bring people together and to try and grow a united front, I guess. There were reasons that those things didn't eventuate, and I think the new body is trying really hard to bring people together now in a very in a way that's non-judgmental, and that's probably a really big thing. I think we need to be proud about Montessori. I think we need to use that word often. I think we need to make sure that we are seen in the general public as being not an alternative, but but as an equal and above, in my opinion, to anything else that's out there. I think we can do it, but I think it needs a lot of people to talk and just get on. And I don't like conflict. I don't feel like there's a reason for that at an adult level. We try and teach children to be peaceful, and we try and give negotiating skills to children to work out their problems and to, you know, to go forward. And we treat our children with respect and ask them to respect each other. And I think if we as adults can use that same methodology of being respectful with each other and not feeling any better than anyone else, but just let's come together and work on a common goal, then I think we can do it. But it just needs people to, and look, you know, I think the year of COVID has actually contributed to a lot of people dropping their guard about themselves, because we were all placed into a position where we're all vulnerable to something that we couldn't control. And so I think, in my opinion, that's made a lot of people just more open to learning from each other. And I see that around me. I see it with my staff. I see lots of people who, little things don't matter anymore. You know, there's bigger things. And so I hope that our movement can do the same, can take from that and say, let's forget all the little differences. We're all going to be different. Let's work together for the children. And that's what this was all about. So yeah.
So 8 years ago, when I came into Montessori, Australia's goal was 15% of children being educated by Montessori. Do you think we're on our way there?
I think in the early childhood realm we could be. I think there's a lot of work to do for us to get to grow in the space of primary and middle primary years. But I think unless we start at the beginning and grow from there, it's not going to happen. So I think we have to wait for our families to demand that, you know, that somewhere, a space for them to go into to continue their education, and that's happening. And it's a lot of families over the years who've said to us, you know, this has been such a beautiful experience, and now we have to go to the real world with our children. You know, please, can you think about, you know, how can we start a primary area where we can start, let our children have more of this. And I think eventually that will happen, the more that we support those early years. I think it'll take a long time for the 15% to happen, but I think it's a vision we should hang on to. And that means really being involved at the top as well, and being involved in government, and letting people hear that name in government. All of those things count. So, oh, sorry, my computer's making lots of noises, but so yeah, many years ago, for the centenary of Montessori, we hosted Phyllis Warback, who was a lady in her 90s who had actually worked with Maria Montessori and trained with Maria Montessori and used to travel with Maria Montessori. And she made herself available at the age of 91 to go around to various countries. She said she would do a presentation for nothing at each of the countries if someone would host her for a week. And so I hosted her in Adelaide, and she stayed at my home, which was a really privileged position, because we got to hear a lot of stories about the person, Maria Montessori, not what people thought she was, but who she was. And one of the biggest things that I take from those discussions was that Maria Montessori didn't want her methodology to be seen as a perfect vision of something. You know, she was a scientist, and she would tell me the stories of actually Maria Montessori going into a centre where someone actually showed her how to present the pink tower, you know, and you know, when she was, just lots of little stories, anecdotal stories, where it was really important that for Maria, it wasn't about the perfection. It wasn't about someone interpreting something and saying, this is Montessori. That's not what she did. That's not how she grew her methodology. She grew her methodology through observation, and through her writing became a methodology. But she didn't ever want it to be just one way. And she wanted the children to experiment with things and the children to show the way. And that's why I often think when we're when we are all arguing about whether we do the pink tower this way, or, you know, it doesn't matter. It just really doesn't matter. In the long run, what the child gains from this is what's important. And so I just feel always grateful for that time that I had with Phyllis Wallbank, because it just reminds me that there was a person called Maria behind this. And, she wanted this to be something that was excuse me, more of like I said, at the heart of what children need, in understanding what children need, not about the materials, not about everything else that was the most important. That was just their tools of learning. What's important are giving children and watching them and giving them what they're ready to do and their needs to be fulfilled and to feel secure. And so I always feel really good about that. And when all these discussions come up about, different training groups who've decided one way or the other that you do things, I just think, well, Maria Montessori wouldn't have liked that. She wouldn't have wanted that. She my understanding is that she would have been just saying, let the child do it, and let's stop arguing about this. So I feel very privileged to have had that time, and I hang on to that a lot in what we do.
Absolutely. And so from that insight and that reflection, what do you think Maria Montessori would be doing now? How would she be viewing, especially early years
Yes,
and
yes.
the long daycare setting? How do you think she would be viewing it now?
Yeah. I think she'd be surprised, actually, about what we're having to cope with outside of just looking after the children for a start, because as we know, the regulations now are pushing us in such a different direction, and making us accountable in a very different way than what I think Maria Montessori would have been happy with. I think she would have said that we're accountable to the children, and I believe that too. And so I think she probably would have been fairly horrified, I think, at the rules and regulations that have been placed around a lot of what the work we do. I think she probably would be surprised at the level. I mean, she didn't really look after babies. And we've had to adapt Montessori principles into caring for babies 6 months old, and in some centres earlier than that. And I think that's a whole different realm. And I think there's a lot more work to do in studying the Montessori approach in looking after children of that age. I think she would be probably quite chuffed that we've grown, that her method has been is still respected and followed. But I do think that she would agree that at the basis of everything is looking after those children. And I think she's probably quite a nice person. She has some interesting stories behind her and in her own personal life, but I think she very genuinely could feel the love of the children. And for her in those times, it must have been such a dramatic change in the behaviour of some of those children by doing what she did and giving them opportunities to be fulfilled and to become sort of normalised. But I think she would appreciate that today's children don't come with quite the same blank slate when they walk into our centres. A lot of our children have travelled overseas and done things and seen things and been exposed to things that we were never, and certainly the children in Maria's days were never exposed to. So we can't just start with nothing with these children. We actually do have to take what they already know. And we really, truly do have to be observers. And I think she'd be proud of that we don't just say, oh, well, the first lesson has to be here and the second lesson has to be here and the third one here for every child. It just can't be. We truly have to learn to be scientists and observe every child and work with that. So, I think she'd be pretty happy that we're all still rolling along. I think she'd give us permission to be a little bit more relaxed about it than we often are. I remember Phyllis Wallbank saying that she would be horrified if she ever walked into a centre and the pink tower, for instance, was perfect. She would just say, why isn't it being used? Why isn't it knocked about? What's happening here? The children not using this. And so, I think she was a realist, and I would like to think she would be a realist today in saying to us all, just get on with the child. just look after those children.
Yeah. And so finishing off, what do you think your legacy will be? Or what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, goodness. Well, I have a daughter, first of all, who's my legacy for being brought up in a Montessori world, and she's continuing my work, which is just fabulous. I'm really excited about that. I think I would be really happy to feel like I have had some involvement with children and families where I think I've made a difference, or Montessori has made a difference, even if it's really small. In some cases, I feel like I've given opportunity and love to every child who's come through our centre, and I just feel like that's something that not all children are privileged to have, and I am very proud of that. And I think that would be a happy legacy for me if we've just influenced enough to give children a sense of being and a sense of the fact that they are special. Every single child is special. So that's my legacy, I hope.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Barb. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And I look forward to sharing your story with people across the globe.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to
Thank
talk to you. Take care.
you. See ya.
Bye bye.